Stormgate is an up-and-coming RTS by Frost Giant that is fully funded until release. At least, that's what Frost Giant promised its would-be backers in its opening sentence on the Kickstarter they launched 2.5 months back. They have since made their goal 20 times over on Kickstarter, unlocking all the stretch goals with 2.4 million in Kickstarter backing funds in total. Kickstarter backers have enabled physical collector's editions, pay for beta access, and have financed more extensive multiplayer testing via the open beta access. As of yesterday, Frost Giant has opened a Reg CF offering, which I had to look up what that means. It's an equity round for non-accredited crowdfunding investors to reserve investments into Frost Giant ownership, with a minimum of about $490 per person if you're interested in investing, up to a total maximum of $5 million in total equity funding over a 12-month period. I had to look that up because I've never invested in anyone or anything in this way. So I looked up what Reg CF offering is, and it is a regulation crowdfunding, and apparently the regulations for it are maximum 5 million in a 12-month period. So I wanted to look at Stormgate project with you guys and answer a couple of questions. Where does it go from here? What does it take for Stormgate to come out fully finished and to be to their own satisfaction and to the consumer's satisfaction? What parts of the game that were perhaps less well received by the community could still change? How realistic are they? And should you invest in Stormgate? Now, I'm not asking you to. I'm just looking at Stormgate and the monetization behind the product because I'm a big RTS player. I was a pro gamer in RTS for 11 years, and Stormgate has been touted as the next new big thing in RTS. It is made by ex-Blizzard devs that have reformed and made Frost Giant the company, and they started working on and announcing Stormgate the game, which is an RTS with some twists, about 3 years ago. So these were the questions that I set out to find when I started doing some preparation and research for this video. First, I would like to look at the monetization timeline with you guys. So I looked this up because I was wondering, why is Stormgate opening up funding for the public? So these are the financial investments so far into Stormgate. There was a 4.7 million initial seed. Initial seed or seed funding, meaning to get you started, right? To pay all the cost. Gaming development is very expensive. You need staff, you need an engine, you need to build an engine. First you decide what game you want. Then you're gonna make or choose an engine that fits that, and then you're gonna go and make the game. So the investors were 1UP Ventures, GC Tracker, Riot Games, which is Tencent, right? Tencent fully owns Riot Games, but I guess Riot Games might be the title that they use when they do foreign investments. Maybe they have like a better name or something, but that's just a guess. I don't know. Maybe there is an intrinsic difference between the two. And then there's Griffin Gaming Partners as well. The date of this funding round was 20 October 2020. The goal for it was, as listed, getting started building the framework. And we can see that investment over here. Blizzard vets from Frost Giant Studios, Tim Morton and Tim Campbell, raised 4.7 million in seed funding for real-time strategy game studio Frost Giant. And this is the seed investment. Okay. Then the next one, 5 million was invested 5 months later, or 155 days later in 2021. This was by Kona Venture Partners. I'm not familiar with them. Global Founders Capital, RX Bars, co-founder Jared Smith, and entrepreneur Eden Chen. And the goal here was scaling the development team. Here's the 5 million investment as listed on gamesindustry.biz. Blizzard veteran James Anhalt joins them, who I'm not familiar with him, but he was ex-Blizzard as well then. And this is going to go towards scaling the development team. 10 million is a lot of money for many of us, but of course for a gaming company to create a game like Stormgate, this is still somewhat peanuts, as you would be expecting to have a development cycle from anywhere from 2 to 5 years to make a game like this. And it could be longer, especially if you're planning live service as well. New projects, new campaign missions, rebalancing, anti-cheat, customer service, marketing, etc. So that's really not a lot of money yet, the $10 million. By comparison, StarCraft 2 took about 7 years to be made. though perhaps there was some mismanagement and changing direction sometime, as described by Pirate Software, who said that he had a manager when he was working on StarCraft 2 that continually asked him and everyone else to do extensive testing for things that were not ready for testing yet, which he found to be a stupid way of working on the game. So doesn't mean it needs to take 7 years, but StarCraft 2 did. Okay. So firstly, why are we talking about the funding and so on? I have question marks about why there is a user-made funding opened up, because it's kind of unusual that Frost Giant is essentially selling shares of themselves. I think that's what it is. I'm not sure. I've never done investment. I've never let anyone invest in me or any of my projects in this way. So I just wanted to learn more, and that's why I'm sharing with you guys what I'm learning, right? Because there are different ways of getting funding. As you can see, some of them are from companies, and some of it, like the Kickstarter and the equity, is coming from us, the player, the user. So the next one is $25 million. This came 11 months or 327 days after the additional seed of funding. This would comprise the total amount of investment from accredited investors, like companies, businesses, and wealthy individuals. And this included Kakao Games, who I believe are a Korean developer, but I guess I shouldn't say it without being sure, but I think they're a Korean developer. And 20 million of the $25 million was actually by Kakao. And they said it was to increase their global profile and growth strategy. Additional investors include past investors Bitcraft Ventures, Global Founders Capital, and Riot Games, and also Gaingels and Mantis Venture Capital. The goal for Stormgate for Frost Giant was to expand its team and development. So as we can see, there are repeat investors Bitcraft, Global Founders Capital, and Riot Games. So my first question here is, and I don't have an answer for it, is why did these companies not invest again for round 4 or round 5? But perhaps we should see what the purpose is for the Kickstarter and the equity. And the Kickstarter is basically where I got the idea about making this video, because the Kickstarter happened on 5 December, which is about 2.5 months ago, and it came the longest after the longest hiatus of not having a public investment announced. 22 months after the $25 million investment, and the goal for the Kickstarter, as listed on Frost Giant's own Kickstarter page, the goal for the investment is listed as being: Stormgate is fully funded to release. This Kickstarter is in part a response to fan requests for a way to purchase a physical collector's edition for Stormgate. Additionally, we've received countless requests for beta access. Scaling online multiplayer testing for a massive audience can get very expensive, which I believe, beyond what we can support without additional funding. In other words, without additional funding, they cannot scale online multiplayer testing for a massive audience enough. Now, this is pretty gray expression. We don't know what the definition of a massive audience is. There's many ways to read it, the favorable and the less favorable way, but they're asking for $100,000 total. And while I can ignorantly agree, since I don't know, that it's very expensive to have server space for games and so on, 100,000 doesn't feel like a lot to help server costs for the game. Maybe initially, and maybe until they can start selling the game to people. Well, the game is going to be free to play, but start selling components in the game, such as campaign missions. But it's not a very high amount to ask for, 100,000. Now, of course, I, like the next person, can be aware that they might expect this goal to be exceeded and reached, which it did in 15 minutes, and it was then exceeded 24 times over. But not entirely outside of expectations, because the stretch goals actually include up to 2.3 million as well. So it seems like the community generously supported the Kickstarter for Stormgate with about as much as had been promised in stretch goals, showing again that there's a very passionate and spending power community behind the RTS scene. People that are hoping for RTS to continue to succeed and thrive, and hoping that Stormgate is going to be the one that will set forth the tradition of a highly competitive but also accessible online multiplayer competitive potential esports title that's going to be fun to play. And I hope that as well. So it was funded in 15 minutes, and then it was overfunded all the way till the final stretch goal, with the goals being a physical collector's edition, paid beta access, but that the game is already fully funded to release. Now this is becoming a little bit of a tripping point, because yesterday we got this news. After a $2 million Kickstarter on a fully funded game, the strategy game from former Warcraft and Starcraft devs is now looking for even more funding. Frost Giant is looking for investors. The developers behind Stormgate are looking for players to invest in their studio after smashing through their Kickstarter goals with over $2 million raised. As reported by VG247, developer Frost Giant turned to a new method of funding for its game Stormgate, equity funding. And I went to the website where they offer it. StarterEngine.com allows for public offerings like this. And as is noted, they say here, this Reg CF offering is made available through Start Engine. But somewhere else I read, it's not a Reg CF. Oh yeah, it is Reg CF, yeah. That's the other name for regulation crowdfunding. So this, I looked this up, and this is crowdfunded, a crowdfunded funding round. Now, as you can see, there's almost $600,000 reserved. And I saw that the regulation for this is maximum of 5 million. So they're over 10% of the reservation. But this is just a reservation so far. Reserving shares is simply an indication of interest. The minimum stepping into amount is $497. 300 people have invested it, but it's just an indication of interest. It involves no obligation or commitment of any kind. I'm not familiar with this kind of structure, so I don't know how popular or I really don't know much about it at all. You can make your own opinion about it as you like. I have personally not reserved or invested and didn't intend to do so. They did ask me before going public with this if I wanted to be one of the backers, and I've decided not to, as that's not something I generally do. 43,000 has been confirmed to be invested already via private backers, which is like a handful, couple of dozen. And this, at the time of writing this, was the reservation. But again, this is just a show of interest. And this was 2.5 months after the Kickstarter crushed its goals. So my main question here is, why none of the big shot investors have invested additional rounds? And also, if it was fully funded, why is this needed? So looking at the goals for the equity round, to support marketing efforts for Stormgate's upcoming early access launch. Now, marketing efforts are multitudinous. You can pay streamers to do YouTube or Twitch videos. I have done Stormgate videos and Twitch streams, and this has been via exclusive early access in a certain time slot, but this was completely unpaid and voluntary, just because I wanted to check out the game and show it to my audience. As far as I know, but there could be things outside of my knowledge. I know it is shocking, but it's true. As far as I know, they have not paid any influencers to do any paid sponsorship yet. I've looked at people's titles and it never said /ad or /sponsorship or /partner. Any of the legal required phrases that show that there's been paid promotion. So the marketing efforts could be something like, getting other celebrities outside of gaming to talk about it. It could be buying advertisement pages on websites. It could be on the paper. It could be in Times Square. It could be to sponsor streamers. But of course, marketing is very expensive. I've seen some developers say that it could be half of your total cost to do marketing on the game. That, of course, is going to differ wildly from company to company. But essentially, if you're backing this and if you end up investing, know that you are investing into the marketing efforts for Stormgate, which is not directly antithetical, opposite, of the fully funded part. I've seen some people on Reddit say that if the Kickstarter said that Stormgate is already fully funded, then how come you're asking for more money via the equity round? And technically, if the goal stated is just for marketing effort, that is not the opposite of what Frost Giant said. So that is not, let's say, the wrong kind of messaging by Frost Giant. I did find it interesting that there was a report that the company is valuated at $150 million. $150 million was the official valuation, but I couldn't find who decided that valuation or if it's realistic. That's a lot of money for a company that hasn't released a game yet and hasn't made any sales yet. $150 million. So that's a lot of zeros. This much. And by comparison, the amount of investment so far is about 47 million. So there's a gap in the amount of investment they have, which of course they had to spend on art, on music, on wages for employees and so on. And that's a pretty big difference. And I personally do not understand it, but that's for you to have your own opinion about. So start yesterday, there is a disgruntled Redditor, Empyrean Sky, who has this title. First, I'd like to say that I love the direction Stormgate is going in, and I wouldn't want anything less than for it to succeed. I'm only looking for the truth, and I don't intend to discredit the Frost Giant team in any way. It recently became evident that Stormgate is only fully funded until early access begins, and that they will need to secure funds to continue development. So that is a little different. Frost Giant launching crowd equity campaign on Start Engine. Our intent has been very transparent about funding situation with our community. Hopefully I can enable some of your open questions. So I'm considering joining myself, but I have to admit this is the first time I got a bit concerned. Well-funded companies don't do this, showing off your product early, doing the Kickstarter, wanting to release EA this summer, despite the game clearly needing a lot of work to cook, indicates to me they have some budget issues. And he's saying, we are an independent studio with 35 million raised. Modern AAA games have budgets over 100 million before considering marketing expenses. Stormgate is fully funded to get us to our early access release. So it's this sentence by the official communications director of Frost Giant, Gerald Villoria, that has some people up in arms a little bit. Because the Kickstarter clearly said fully funded until release. And I know that could be confusing nomenclature, but I think most people, including myself, when reading fully funded until release, thought until the game actually releases. Now I know that we are living in a world where games have all kinds of soft launches. You've got the technical alpha, the early access, you've got the alpha, you've got beta, closed beta, open beta, early access, and then you've got the game release. And games can spend incredibly variable periods of time in any of these phases. Personally, I find it extremely confusing, and I think sometimes it's super legit, and sometimes it gets used a little bit to perhaps hide for inefficiencies or to have an opt-out that says, well, this thing isn't working yet, but after all, we're only early access. Some games, like Valheim, could be in early access for years. And of course, Baldur's Gate 3 was in early access for many years. And to be honest, my opinion of Baldur's Gate 3, after initially playing it early, many years ago, started souring a little bit, knowing that they had been in early access for so many years, but not following the development or how the developers were using the information they were getting from gamers that were playing Baldur's Gate 3 and giving feedback. When Baldur's Gate 3 finally came out, I fully forgave or removed these feelings of doubt that I had on the early access, because it came out so well. It came out in such a good state, and of course not bug-free, but overall an incredibly successful game, Baldur's Gate 3, and it did have an extended early access period. But I don't remember them saying something like this, and this is where people are tripping over a little bit, but there's many different points of view to it. I went to go ahead and ask ChatGPT, and I know they're no authority on anything, but what does fully funded until release mean? Typically refers to a project or initiative that has secured enough financial resources to cover all anticipated costs and expenses until its completion or release. And then, could fully funded until release also mean just until early access with the tier 3 tech tree still missing? It is possible. It might imply that the project has secured funding to cover all anticipated costs up to release, but doesn't necessarily specify the completeness of the release project. In some cases, a project might be fully funded for its initial release, but certain features or components like the tech tree may be planned for a later phase. So this is what people are wondering now. How finished is it with the funding that has been gotten? Because some people that have backed the Kickstarter were under the impression that everything was a done deal and they simply are paying for beta access, earlier beta access, and for the other perk, which is physical collector's edition. So it is naturally a little bit worrying for them to see additional funding round requests. But that is for you to decide what you think about that. So he's saying, to this date, we have invested almost the entirety of our funding into the development of the game. For marketing, we've been relying on word of mouth and sharing our progress with the RTS community to grow public awareness of Stormgate. This campaign is targeted at raising additional funds to support publishing efforts for our upcoming release, as well as ongoing development. We have a long road ahead after all, and plenty of work to do before our official launch in the future. Early access is slated to last for about a year, and then they were going to have the official release after that. If Frost Giant, says this Redditor, Empyrean Sky, needs more funds to develop the game, that's fine, but it should have been communicated from the start. When you market a game as fully funded to release, people are naturally inclined to think that there's going to be a full feature-complete release, regardless of community support. I can't help but think many of us, especially the Kickstarter backers, feel deceived when it turns out that release is only early access. Now, Kickstarting is always a voluntary donation. I think you should see it that way. But it is based on the information that you are given by the developer. It's based on trust, and there is a lot to trust here because Stormgate are comprised of ex-devs, right? They are living the ideology of continuing to save RTS, and there's been a lot of content creators vouching for them and for the game. So generally, there is a lot of trust into the company. So a little bit of a summarization. Kickstarter asked for 100k, fully funded 15, reached a total of 2.4 million, and there were 88 backers who supported with $2,000 or more to be in the game as an NPC or extra benefits. For the equity round, I personally don't understand how they reached this amount, or if this is true, why there were no additional investments from the bigger companies that have invested in the past. I would imagine that there's a vested interest for companies like Riot Games and Kakao to also support the marketing efforts, and I would imagine they probably have contracts for dividends so that they can get a return on investment if this whole thing ends up working out. What I also didn't see is when I went to the website for the reservations of equity, I couldn't find any information about how you get paid back in this. I'm not sure if this is correctly described as you buying stocks or shares of Frost Giant. It is a regulation crowdfund offering. This investment is speculative, illiquid, and involves a high degree of risk, including the possible loss of your entire investment. The early access is planned to release in Q3 2024, which is in just half a year, which means the game is 1.5 years from official release and half a year from early access release. Equity means shares, says Jimmy Turks. Manuli says it is not like shares. So again, I don't know what it is, but what I can't find from this is whether you can have a reasonable expectation to share in the profits of the game if it does well. And when you invest in a company that has been officially valuated as costing $150 million, if that valuation would be lower 2 years from now, for instance, would that mean that you have a pro rata reduction in your investment value? Say you invest 1,000 now and later it gets valued at 15 million instead of 150 million. Does that mean that your $1,000 investment is now worth 100 if you withdrew it? And what about profit? If there are profits, are you guaranteed of dividends? Do you have a contract when you sign this? These are questions I don't have answers to, but the confusion around those and the uncertainty around those has definitely convinced me not to invest as well at this point. Even though I want RTS and Stormgate to succeed, and I want as many RTS games as possible to succeed. This guy says he's an attorney at a firm in a major US city, staying private 24. My practice is entirely litigation with a focus on commercial litigation. Now, of course, some people in comments said you can be anyone you want on the internet. We don't know if it's true, but let's assume it's true. This puts me in a unique position to be candid. Simply put, he says he doesn't represent FG, Frost Giant. The vast majority of this community is acting ignorant and ridiculous. I'm wasting billable hours just to write this post. So he has financial investment in writing this post. He's sacrificing finances for it. There's a lack of understanding as to how startups operate, the issues they face, and their general strategy for development. Raising additional funding is not indicative in any way of a fading venture. So if there's a lack of understanding, then I would love for him to explain it, usually, instead of saying you don't understand but then not explaining it, which also doesn't prove that he understands it. And this is a statement we would have to take at blank value, at face value. Second, the amount of posts and comments concerning the financial decisions for a company with a valuation of $150 million is laughable. A tiny portion of this community has only ever been involved with business ventures of this size. It doesn't hurt to ask questions, but it does hurt to insinuate individuals have been defrauded because they spent a couple of $100s on a Kickstarter campaign. Right now you can log on to Steam, you can play it. You have the confirmation that you have 2 fully fleshed out factions to play, which is of course not true. Tier 3 isn't there yet. The races are about 2/3 of the way released. We do not know what Tier 3 looks like. And also much of the game is subject to change, which also means it is not fleshed out. For instance, we already know from Frost Giant that the way that creeping works is entirely going to change. They've said so themselves. And if it's entirely going to change, that necessarily means it's amorphous, not fleshed out. So this argument doesn't really fly. With the potential for more, the line drawing that you expected FG to be funded is disingenuous. I don't think it's disingenuous. You already have a game to play and there's more guaranteed. I think we can reasonably expect 3 races fully fleshed out with an understanding of how the gameplay looks like. And then he says finally he likes RTS and can we focus? So yeah, I'm not fully with him there. Most likely, says Denthi in chat, they have used convertible loan agreements, an agreement pursuant to which a person loans money, and upon certain thresholds, the investor is allowed to convert its loan into shares into the invested company. Of course, it could also be direct equity in the form of share purchases. I'm an M&A lawyer here. Okay, so you're saying that it is possible that you wouldn't be buying direct shares, but you are essentially putting in money that may be later converted to shares. So this is the news about the Kickstarter. And then here, the Kickstarter news also had some eyebrows raised for some people. They are fully funded already. This is just for a collector's edition and beta access so they can scale the infrastructure. This is a parroting of the Kickstarter page and shows that people are talking about the game already being fully funded. It looks cool, but financing via Kickstarter, I don't know. If they have a history of delivering, sure, I guess. But the thing is, many great games have released after Kickstarter campaigns. Kickstarters do many things for a gaming company. They raise awareness, they raise additional funding, and they create a feeling of involvement by the community that invests. And even the community that doesn't invest may feel tangentially related and relatable to those that did invest, thinking we did it, even if they didn't put in $1 themselves. So I do think that Kickstarters are a very smart idea. You see it in content creators sometimes as well. Creating a crowdfunding plan that says, if we achieve this money, then I will do this really cool thing. But behind the scenes, the content creator already wants to do this really cool thing. He's already secured the plan, he's already set it up, he's already got the funding, but he would like a bit of extra money for the effort and also to get people invested emotionally into the project. That is not such a crazy marketing plan. And also choosing an amount like 100,000 and then, knowing it's going to go over is again a smart marketing play. As a developer, it's not going to be easy. I imagine many game development companies that try to make a game, I would say probably the majority does not succeed and gets very profitable. So it is not easy, and I do think it will be super cool if this RTS comes out and it's going to be super popular. I have a thoughts video on Stormgate as well, and you can find it on my channel, Grubby Talks. I released it a couple of days ago, so you can see my initial assessment of it. And of course, I hope it's going to get better and better as well. And I'll have more to say about that a little bit later in this video also. Here's another news on GamesPress. Early reservations for Frost Giant's Start Engine campaign, which is the equity thing, receive a 5% bonus in shares. So this seems to indicate it is already shares. As far as I know, shares should have a dividends payout as well when you do well. But I haven't seen the contract about that. Perhaps if you go further in the start engine website and you actually click reserve now, you will get terms and conditions that will describe what you can expect in terms of profit. You're investing in a dream, of course, and you're investing in something that has already taken great form, but you're also, of course, maybe thinking it could be a financially shrewd investment and you would be hoping to get some return on it. So that's where we're at right now with the monetization. I have a couple of more things to say about it. Let's talk about Stormgate's release plan. The beta that we played recently, some people have characterized it as an alpha or early access. This is really a terminology thing, and it affects the gaming industry worldwide. In the end, it's gonna be about what marketing terms they use, and what it means to you might not be the same to someone else. Stormgate, right now, is quite a fun game to play. I didn't have as high expectations because the game at the moment doesn't look fantastic, doesn't sound fantastic, but it plays quite nicely, and the gameplay was pretty fun, and I found myself getting into the build order creation and the strategization and the battle tactics more and more as I played. I warmed up to it. But I have a large vested interest in having RTS games be successful because I'm a creator within that sphere. A new RTS game would be really interesting for me personally on a soulful level, also for my Twitch and my YouTube channel, right? That's why I gave it a chance. The fully funded until release part seems to have morphed a little bit into until early access release, which most people do not define as being the same. So how has Stormgate's reception been so far? I would categorize it roughly into 4 components. There's been the hype aspect, the cinematic trailer, the aesthetics, and the gameplay. So the hype initially was turned on quite a lot, especially within the RTS sphere. They are ex-Blizzard developers. They are hoping to save RTS if it needs saving, or to continue its tradition. Since Blizzard wasn't going to make an RTS anymore, they are going to make an RTS. And content creators have been showing off the game, of course also with the hope of being an early adopter, getting pro in the game early, being an early winner, an early creator in it, and also just because it's fun. A lot of people have been having a lot of fun with it. I've seen Mana, he's already played like 200, 300, 400 games. Artosa seems to be having fun with it. Many RTS creators are genuinely having a great time with the game. They can look past the lukewarm reception of the cinematic trailer, which is aimed at a bit younger audience, I would say. They can look past the aesthetics. The initial and current graphics are probably not enough to wow everyone. I've seen a range of opinions that vary from it's not that bad, to I don't really mind graphics too much, to I don't need graphics to be good in my game, to it's okay, or I kind of like it. And then there's also been opinions like I don't like it at all, it looks Pixar-esque, it looks Fortnite-esque, and it's really not all there yet. But I've seen not a lot of people super excited or hyped about this part. So most people play Stormgate not because of the cinematic trailer and not because of the aesthetics. The audio isn't all there yet, though there's some promise there since they hired Frank Klopacki, who has done Command & Conquer music, the Command & Conquer music. And the setting atmosphere is, as I saw someone say, coniferous trees on a would-be alien planet with demons and with humans. There's a kind of conjunction of different atmospheres together, perhaps without as unique of a creative vision as could be. But again, people that are interested either in saving or continuing RTS, or that have fallen in for this marketing, can look past these 2 points to get to the final point, the gameplay. Now, this is the order that you categorize a game's potential for success in. First, you need to hear about it, which comes from this. Then you see the trailer and the gameplay, and has been lukewarm reception on these. And then finally, there's the gameplay itself, right? And I think this part is actually currently Stormgate's strongest suit, the gameplay. It is fun, right? Now, what can still change? What part of the game can still change? Which of the above are positive, which are negative? Which ones are easy to change and therefore likely? In my YouTube comments, I've seen many people theory craft about what can still be changed and what cannot be changed. These are the YouTube comments to my thoughts on the open beta of Stormgate. I've seen every opinion represented, including it is still very simple to change the graphics for the game later on. You can simply replace models with others. It is not difficult. the main thing that is important is, and then they talk about another point. But I think that's probably not true. I think the investment in the graphical look for the game is extensive. I do not think that you're going to go to a different art style if people think it's too cartoonish, plastic, or Fortnite-esque. The graphics seem to be more aimed at a younger audience, which is going to be like more of a like mobile game look, as some people describe it, whereas the gameplay is more geared towards both the veteran audience, which is me, and people maybe that are normally more afraid of playing RTS games, like Asmongold, for instance. I saw him mostly play the 3 versus E mode, which I think it's great when a game invests in 2 different modes, one very suitable for the casual gamer and one very suitable for the sweaty piano, keyboard, octopus hand gamer, right? And some people think HOTS kind of has a younger look as well, Heroes of the Storm, right? So I personally disagree that the graphics can easily be changed, which means it will probably be a point of continuous underwhelmingness. That's my opinion on that. The audio, I think, is very easy to change. You can simply change it without any change to the gameplay or to the look of the game. It is the most disconnected from everything else, and yet one of the most important things. I personally believe audio is more important than graphics over the whole. It is more noticeable when something is slightly off in audio, in my opinion. And it is not trivial to replace voice acting, as it would carry additional costs, but it is easy to add to things, and it is easy to add music tracks later on that could replace original, less popular music tracks if that ends up becoming a focus for the company to do. Though I would imagine they should not like to invest money into either a graphical overhaul or a audio overhaul, as it seems like they need all their money they can get to market the game and to also make the gameplay the best it can possibly be, including having money for server costs and paying the wages of their developers. So I don't think these things are extremely likely to change. The trailer, the graphics, the marketing part now is somewhat tied in with why are they offering this equity round, and should that spell any concern for the viability of their continued investment? So that is for you guys to come up with an opinion on. And then finally, which of the above are difficult or impossible to change, therefore unlikely? We kind of covered that already. I think the one that's most malleable, most amorphous, most likely to change is the gameplay. Changing the balance of the game by giving someone double damage, half damage, giving someone more range, less range, faster turn rate, and slower turn rate, right? All of these are relatively trivial to do by comparison. The engine is more difficult to modify. If the pathfinding isn't working appropriately, or unit splitting, grouping, body blocking, surrounds, if any of that does not work how it should, that is going to be excessively difficult to change, as it is one of the first things you do in a game development is to start building the engine, something that Frost Giant has also been very open about. Luckily, that part is working quite well in Stormgate. As for the gameplay balancing and unit design, that could still change, and I think it is the easiest part to change from any of these parts of the game. Finally, Frost Giant's communication. It is always risky to communicate with the community about every step of development. I've always personally thought that it is more attractive to me as a consumer, and this is a very personal thing, to be surprised, gobsmacked, and sucker punched by a game without any expectation or prelude. Age of Empires 4 was not on my map. It came out and I really enjoyed playing it. I was not part of testing it privately for 2 years, but some people like that kind of thing. First time I played Slay the Spire or Faster Than Light, I did not extensively see it in its infancy before it was finally ready for a full release. So this is going to color your opinion on things. This is going to color all of our opinions on things. I've seen Gerard, the communications director for Frost Giant, compare themselves to StarCraft, saying he's very impressed with how far Stormgate has come in just a couple of years of development. His team is working so fast, and he's probably right on that. saying that StarCraft 2 took many more years to produce. But of course, I didn't see StarCraft 2 2 years into development, and I can't help but have an opinion on what I do see earlier than that. And that is going to remain in our memories as well, which is why I usually advocate to sucker punch us a little bit more, rather than getting our hopes up via we're gonna save RTS, and then having everyone's expectations sky high. If I were to show you guys a composition of my own singing, I would probably prelude it more with this is gonna be shit than this is gonna be great. You will enjoy it more if I say it's gonna be shit. Maybe you'll say, wasn't that bad? But if I say you'll hear the best goddamn singing you've ever heard, and then I play my own song, chances are you're gonna ridicule me and be more critical. And that's just how human philosophy works, human psychology works. Because of that, you can't help but blame us for having some opinions on how far the game has come by the time that we are seeing it and playing it. So when there's no chance in hell that Frost Giant has not seen people being a little lukewarm to the graphics. But as far as I know, they've not commented on any of it or saying this will not change or this can still change. And that's kind of logical. You can communicate with the community, but you can't talk about everything, especially if you have no intent to change it or no ability to change it anymore. You would rather probably just not mention it. Is Sucker Punch... Yeah. We want to hear your song now? Okay, another video. Anyway, to conclude things, Stormgate is looking for funding for their marketing efforts for the game. My stance on it is that I'm a little underwhelmed by these aspects. I'm immune to these aspects because I no longer consider ex-Blizzard to be a good thing because of what Blizzard did with Reforged and Diablo 4 and so on and so forth. So I'm not impressed by this. I am not going to back a game just because they take it upon themselves to carry an ideology that matters so much to all of us. Continuing or saving RTS is not something any one company can do, in my opinion. And if they do it, it will be based on not the story they say, but the game itself and its own viability. This will only last as long as until you actually get your hands on the game, and then you decide if you like it or not. That's what's going to carry it forward. So I'm pretty immune to this part. I didn't like this, but it doesn't matter. This matters a lot to me. I really care about good sound. And not super impressed yet, but waiting to be impressed. And the gameplay was fun. So I am going to play it again. I'm not going to spam it in the hopes that I'll be the first Stormgate pro gamer winning the beta access tournament and so on and so forth. I'm just going to be patient, hands off, play it any chance that I can get when there's new content. And I'm looking forward to see what the third race is going to be. And I'm looking forward to see what the tier 3s are going to be for every race. And and hopefully I wish them all the best. I wish them all the success, all the luck. I hope they get all the investment that they need and can put a great game on the table. I'll be playing it both to see if I'm going to enjoy it and also to show it off to you guys. All right, that's about it. See you next time.